Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac. I hope that you are doing well. Happy new moon in Scorpio. Going to do a bit of a different show today. Um, the new moon in Scorpio is such a marker, so we are going to discuss that a little bit. But I want to take a sort of more long-term sort of view of the cycle. And I'm going to look at that obviously through the astrology, but also we're going to have a look at some macro happenings and or not happenings as it actually is, and also we'll have a chat about the technical analysis, even though that's looking pretty shitty, to be fair, when we look at Bitcoin's TA. But we can put them all together and have a look at what we're looking at really for the rest of this cycle. So let's get straight into it and start with the new moon in Scorpio. Um, One of my favorite signs, actually. I really love it. And this new moon is really the portal of death, of rebirth, and of radical self-truth. And I think that's what I really love about Scorpio energy is it's very in the depths. It's the underworld, it's the hidden things. And it's the truth that sits beneath the surface. And I love looking at that. So this new moon at 28 degrees Scorpio arrives like this, a deep exhale of a breath that you didn't even realize you were holding. So Scorpio is, as I said, the energy of the underworld, of soul alchemy, of shadow diving, and of unapologetic truth. So when the moon goes dark in this sign, we're really invited to shed this skin that we've been outgrowing for far too long. And interestingly enough, that's the theme of this year as well, the year of the snake, 2025. It's about shedding that skin that we've been outgrowing for a really long time. So at 28 degrees, this new moon sits in the Anaretic-degree. So it's the final karmic edge of the sign. And this is where we experience intensity of culmination and just this real pressure to evolve. So a Scorpio new moon in this degree, I mean, she doesn't whisper, let's put it that way. She really demands transformation. So this moon doesn't ask who you've been, it asks who you are becoming. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this. So Scorpio governs the mysteries that we don't really say out loud. So our fears, our desires, our obsessions, and our hidden motivations. So under this new moon, the veil's thin around your own psyche. So you see with like X-ray vision what has been sabotaging your own expansion and what has been waiting to be born. So this new moon is really a psychic detox, like a clearing out of outdated identities, of emotional contracts, of energetic cords, of unprocessed grief, and patterns of self-abandonment, fear of being seen in your power. So Scorpio really invites you to meet your shadow with compassion and not with judgment. The part of you that you've been afraid to confront is the exact part that is holding your superpower. So we're really looking at like what wants to emerge. So with the moon in late Scorpio, we are closing a very deep karmic chapter. And this new moon is your reset point. So it's a blank slate for your next evolution. So something within you is dissolving so that something truer can emerge. So you need to ask yourself under this new moon, what am I ready to bury so my soul can breathe? Where am I being asked to reclaim my power? And what version of me is rising from the ashes? So, this is really a phoenix moon, and every ending is a beginning in disguise. So, let this new moon be your turning point. Let it be the moment that you stop pretending you're small. You're entering a new timeline, and it's one that is shaped by truth and by magnetism and by emotional mastery. So it's like a soul level power. So Scorpio doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be brave enough to transform, to stand at the edge of who you've been, take a breath, step into the version of you who is waiting. And this is really the time for your rebirth. What does this new moon hold for Bitcoin? So it's one of the most consequential Scorpio lunations of the year because it occurs at 28 degrees of Scorpio. So that kind of leads to a karmic final completion degree. And Scorpio rules debt, it rules derivatives, it rules hidden money flows, leverage, liquidation, and shadow finance. So the new moon reset cycles. This one really resets the financial shadow cycle. So what's going on beneath the surface? And Bitcoin is a Scorpio signature asset. So this new moon directly activates its evolutionary purpose. So this is a deep structural reset, not a small like mood shift. So the late degrees of any sign represent culmination, like a pressure, an evolutionary pressure, and some final lessons that come from that sign. So in Scorpio, they correspond to debt unwinding, hidden losses coming to light, leverage positions exposed, liquidity drains, forced transformation, and disruption before rebirth. So this new moon kind of triggers a cycle of exposure, of hidden instability that becomes visible over the next 2 to 4 weeks. So definitely expect some volatility in high risk markets, increased liquidation events, deleveraging, hedge fund repositioning, rising risk aversion, which will then lead to opportunity. But this is the equivalent of markets being flushed to reset before the next major trend. So this new moon, like new moons anyway, like equate to a new cycle, and especially in Scorpio. So new moons begin new cycles of strategy, of risk positioning, of capital allocation, of market sentiment. And Scorpio new moon specifically begins cycles around money buried beneath the surface. So reserves, liquidity pools, derivatives, leverage positions, wealth extraction, and deep value investing. So Scorpio looks where others don't. There are definitely power shifts in global finance and central banks, black swan events, shadow banking, those sorts of things. And then it's really a theme of elimination, which leads to a rebirth. So markets shed unhealthy layers before strengthening. And this new moon starts this period where what was once hidden will be revealed, altering price structures and adoption structures, particularly in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a Capricorn sun with an Aries moon and a Scorpio North Node asset. So Scorpio is built directly into Bitcoin's evolutionary purpose. It exposes corruption. It transforms financial power structures. It thrives during systemic breakdowns. It gains strength when trust and legacy system falls apart. And this is really what the Scorpio new moon activates. So Bitcoin's North Node in Scorpio, which is its destiny point, this signals a long-term alignment with purpose, with decentralization, sovereignty, and shadow finance exposure. Bitcoin's Pluto rulership also has themes of destruction, leading to regeneration, systemic resets, wealth concentration, power struggles, and the rise of alternative systems. So Bitcoin gains momentum when Pluto themes dominate. And this new moon increases social and financial awareness of the need for trustless systems. So this is really a long-term evolutionary signal. So this is a multi-year turning point marking increased institutional exposure, rising distrust in centralized actors, rising demand for self-custody, a shift towards black swan immunity assets. So assets that are able to be held outside of the system. We've seen a massive inflow into gold. So assets like that. capital flowing into assets outside government control. So this new moon strengthens Bitcoin's long-term adoption arc. Bitcoin tends to rally very strongly after Scorpio lunations in general. So once cleansing events finish, and this suggests a temporary shakeout before a powerful upward leg. So in the long term, maybe 6 to 12 months, because this new moon activates a Scorpio Anaretic-degree, it initiates new structural adoption phases. So stronger use case narratives, regulatory exposure of corruption, which benefits Bitcoin as a disruptor of that, as an alternative. Also, rising geopolitical instability. Bitcoin is seen as a hedge of that, as well as gold, but Bitcoin is seen as more of a mobile asset than gold is. It's much easier to move, to leave countries, to move countries, and those sorts of things with Bitcoin than it is with physical gold. And shifts in global monetary power. So this aligns with Bitcoin entering a multi-year expansion era. And this new moon reinforces the narrative. Bitcoin is entering a long-term hyper adoption phase. So we're going to talk more about that, what I see for the cycle. I'm more looking to mid next year for that expansion phase, but we'll have a look at it and we'll dissect it and you can make up your own mind. So the impact on broader financial markets, because Scorpio rules debts, derivatives, shadow banking, leverage, liquidity, underground money flows, insurance, and risk markets, you can expect to see credit stress signals. So corporate debt under pressure, some cautiousness around banks, and strained budgets for governments, which we've already seen after a month of the US government shutdown. So you can also expect to see safe haven flows. So gold has had a massive rally, and we can see more of an upward bias for gold. A temporary increase as people move into cash for safety, and Bitcoin after volatility becomes a preferred alternative safe haven. So you can also expect to see market sentiment resets. So fear leading to liquidation, leading to opportunity, leading to recovery patterns. This is a time for macro repositioning, not for panic, in my opinion. And for traditional market participants as well, during these Scorpio cycles, you really want to avoid taking on new debt, over leveraging portfolios, and just avoiding FOMO entries into overheated assets, potentially like AI-driven assets, I think is what we're seeing at the moment. Really focusing on value investing, defensive allocations, gold exposure, Bitcoin accumulation post-shakeout, and also cash positions for future buying opportunities. So this Scorpio new moon marks the beginning of a new financial cycle based on truth, exposure, and transformation. And it will expose weaknesses in global financial systems, trigger liquidation or unwinding moments, increase Bitcoin volatility, strengthen Bitcoin's long-term use case, and also mark an accumulation window for smart investors. So it'll also initiate this sort of multi-year global shift towards decentralized finance. So that obviously includes Bitcoin, but it also includes tokenization of real world assets. It also, even though I don't see that as being decentralized, it's sort of coming away from the traditional fiat system. And I also see stable coins included in that as well as that sort of centralized aspect of this technological evolution. So this new moon is not gentle, but she is really powerful. And this new moon really clears the path for Bitcoin's next transformation phase. So to start off with, talking about the TA, Bitcoin's TA, looking pretty shitty, to be honest. It has lost major EMAs, including the weekly EMA, which I've discussed in previous videos as being just an important guide for us to hold. So breaking and closing below that is not great, to be honest. Like I don't think anyone believes that the price action is like that great right now. Um, and a lot of people that I respect, really respect even, um, believe that the top is in and we're now shifting to a bear market. I have a few other reasons that I don't think that's the case. The top may be in, but I think that we could have another rally. Um, and I do think we could actually reach new all-time highs, to be honest, further into next year. And I'm going to show you the reasons that I think that. But in regards to the TA, I'm not going to bother bringing up any charts. We know what the charts look like for Bitcoin right now. On that weekly 50 EMA, we haven't had a retest of it. And so we kind of have two options. We maybe retest and reject there. And that to me is a really big warning sign. That's a really bad sign. It's confirmation of the downtrend on the weekly chart, which would not be great. And or we can reclaim it. And so we just have to wait and see how that plays out. So if you are looking purely at technical analysis, then you would be bearish, to be honest. You really would be. Obviously, even though I don't think that we are entering the bear market just yet, um, because the TA is so terrible, you do really need to protect yourself. And look, we've spoken about it on so many videos that I don't think there's anyone sitting here waiting to take profits on this cycle on one particular day. I know that you guys have been scaling out and taking the profits that you want for this cycle gradually at previous highs and sort of protecting yourself in that way. And, there are others that want to see number go up on Bitcoin more than they care about the number go up or down in US dollar value. And so for you guys, it's very easy. You just continue to stack sats, get paid in sats, trade sats, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, it really is kind of a scalper's market at the moment. Honestly, we will get a small reversal signal with not much volume behind it, and we'll maybe get a level one move. And that is all that we've been getting for the last while, actually. So it's not looking great TA wise. And so you do need to be really cautious. You need to protect yourself. You need to understand how to hedge your positions. That really should be your priority at this point in time. And also very seriously considering taking, if you are someone who is holding positions that you want to take profits out of this cycle, to be considering doing that in whatever way works for you at these points in time, right? The reason that I don't think the top is in is for two things. We're going to have a look at the astrology in a minute, but let's first talk about the macro. And there's a lot of things in terms of the macro environment that I personally expected to happen before now. So it's not like these things that we talked about even years ago have happened and they've had no effect on the price. They actually just haven't even happened yet, really. So I just think that we are part of a bigger cycle, and the 4-year Bitcoin cycle is not as relevant this cycle because we are coming to the end of the US property cycle. We are coming to the end of several astrological cycles, and Bitcoin is only a 1.5, $2 trillion asset. So it doesn't fight against these bigger macro or astrological cycles. It goes with the flow. We're along for the ride, whether we like it or not. But in terms of the macro, there's a couple of things that have happened. I'm pausing this episode for just a moment to share with you one of our partners, the Sculpt Society. I'm obsessed with TSS, created by celebrity trainer Megan Roop. It's not just another fitness app, it's the most fun you'll ever have working out. You'll find sculpt, strength, and dance cardio all-in-one, super accessible method that actually works. Whether you have 10 minutes or 50, want low-impact sculpting or full-body dance cardio, the Sculpt Society has you covered. Inside the app, you'll find over 900 on-demand workouts and weekly live classes, plus curated programs that meet you wherever you are, beginner, advanced, or even pre or postnatal. There's no complicated choreography, no guilt, just movement that makes you feel confident and strong in your own skin. You can stream from any device anywhere in the world and even download classes to work out offline. It doesn't matter whether you're in your living room or in a hotel room. So if you've been waiting for a sign to get back into your body and feel good, this is it. Click on the link in the description box and join the Sculpt Society to start your 7-day free trial today. You'll feel the difference after just one class. Let's get back into the episode. That make me think that something else is bigger on the horizon, and we need to be prepared for it. If you are taking profits, you can then be looking for re-entry signals, reversal signals and re-entry signals if that does happen. That's probably the tack that I would take as well, or that I have taken, is to secure some profits and then just be free to let the charts tell you what you need to do and present re-entries for you if you want to re-enter and we do end up reversing for another leg up this cycle. So that just leaves you free. You don't have to be stressing and crystal ball gazing at a time when you want to be taking profits, looking for a perfect day to be taking profits. You can just be scaling out and have the option to re-enter if those reversal signals do present themselves. So that's what I would be doing. But in terms of the macro, we have the US preparing to issue $2,000 stimulus checks to US citizens. We also have Japan preparing $110 billion stimulus package. We have China approving a $1.4 trillion stimulus package. We have the Fed officially ending QT on December 1st. And we have the US issuing $1.9 trillion in treasuries per year. So Canada is also restarting its quantitative easing program. Global M2 money supply is at a record 137 trillion. The global rate cuts are at 320 plus over the last 24 months. So liquidity is coming. And, does that necessarily mean that it, automatically all flows into Bitcoin? No, of course not. I don't think that. But Bitcoin thrives in an inflationary environment where the fiat money is debased and hard assets do really well. It also is deeply affected by global liquidity, as everything is now. We no longer function on productivity, we function on global liquidity. And so, yeah, Bitcoin is no different. And so if these things had already happened, which I thought they would happen late last year, early this year, into this year, but they haven't yet. They're happening now, moving into 2026. If they'd already happened and price was doing what it's doing now, then I would also be calling the top. I'd be flipping completely bearish. But because these things have not yet even occurred, I think it's unwise to really rule them out until they have. So on one hand, you do need to protect yourself, but on the other hand, be open to other possibilities and recognize that things are happening behind the scenes, things are happening at an institutional money flow level, and things are different this cycle, and we need to be prepared for that. There's been a lot of differences this cycle, and we need to be adaptable for that as well. Now, moving on to the astrology, I gave a presentation with for Annie's group in Trade Travel Chill. I was invited by her team member Katie, and I just gave an overview really of the cycle and what's been happening this year and these bigger generational shifts that have been happening. So you will have heard me talk about these things before, and I'm going to add in some new things which are going to give some projections for the future and for the remainder of the cycle. Now, I just want to give a disclaimer before this. Obviously, as always, this is not financial advice. I'm just a crazy Bitcoin astrologer on YouTube. So, what do I know? You shouldn't be making financial decisions based on me. I'm just sharing with you what I'm looking at. But also, I don't want anyone sitting here going, well, Claire said this date. I'm waiting to sell anything for that date, right? Because I absolutely could be wrong. The top might be in. We could be heading into a bear market right now as we speak. And that could be the reality. I don't think it is, and I'm going to show you why. But you need to protect yourself. And if you are wanting to take profits this cycle, then you need to be have been taking profits at previous highs, but also really be protecting those gains as we speak as well. To start off with, we are kind of living through this very rare astrological moment. Definitely been a year where it's a couple of years actually of a generational changing of the guard. So three very slow moving planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, are all shifting signs from 2024 to 2026. So they're shifting signs, they're retrograding, they're shifting into their new signs. So in astrology, this really signals this new era for humanity, and it perfectly parallels with the rise of Bitcoin adoption, decentralized systems, and new models of sovereignty. So to start off with, we had Pluto and Aquarius, and this is like the death of centralized power and the rise of decentralized collective. So Pluto moved from Capricorn into Aquarius on March 23rd, 2023, then retrograded back into Capricorn June 11th, 2023, re-entered Aquarius in January 2024, retrograded on May the 2nd, 2024, returned to Capricorn on the 1st of September 2024, and then re-entered Aquarius for the final time on November 19th, 2024. After that, Pluto has stayed and will stay in Aquarius until 2043. So Pluto in Aquarius marks this dynamic shift in power dynamics and technology and social structures and just collective transformation. So Pluto is this planet of power, of death, rebirth, and control. We've spoken a lot about it on this channel. Entering into Aquarius, which is a sign of decentralization, of networks, of technology, humanity. And Aquarius also rules innovation, rebellion, and the collective. So this long transit of 20 years or so brings with it tech revolutions, radical social, political movements, a dismantling of authoritarian structures, which are these Capricorn themes, and the rise of collective power and activism. So Pluto hasn't been in Aquarius since the American and French revolutions. So obviously times when people rose up and power structures were rewritten. And so this transit represents the collapse of old financial and governmental systems, the rise of new open source peer-to-peer networks like Bitcoin. So it's an era of self-sovereignty, of privacy tech, and of freedom movements. And so, for example, if Pluto in Capricorn was about building the centralized empire, Pluto in Aquarius is about tearing it all down and replacing it with something distributed, transparent, and aligned with more with collective power. We then have Neptune in Aries. So Neptune has moved from Pisces into Aries, and it dipped into Aries on March the 30th this year, retrograded back into Pisces on October 22nd this year, and it will re-enter Aries for good January 2026. January 26, 2026. So it'll stay there until March 2040. So Neptune in Aries is the new spiritual war beginning, and it's the warrior of truth archetype. So Neptune is the planet of dreams, of illusions, and of collective ideals. So moving into Aries, the warrior sign, this is about fighting for a new vision. And after 14 years in Pisces, which is very much the fog, the confusion, the escapism, Neptune in Aries now births a new cycle of idealism, but through action. So Bitcoin will no longer be an abstract idea. It will be embodied by people taking direct action to build a new system, to opt out of corrupt systems, and to redefine value and meaning. So Neptune in Aries is the beginning of a new 165-year Neptune cycle. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. And so Neptune in Pisces from 2011 to 2025 was very dreamy, spiritual, and very much about escapism. And this move into Aries, which is, as I said, the first sign of the zodiac, signals this rebirth of idealism through vision and action and individuality. So the rise of the spiritual warriors and passionate activism is the theme of this transit. And we also can expect to see new art and inspiration driven by a boldness instead of retreat. We'll see a battle between delusion and authenticity in leadership, in religion, and in media. So Neptune in Aries really marks the spiritual battle between illusion and truth, compliance and courage. And Bitcoin is part of that spiritual mission. So the third planet that I want to talk about is Uranus in Gemini. So think of this more as a revolution in information, of communication, and also education. So Uranus entered Gemini on July the 7th, 2025, retrograded back into Taurus on November the 8th, 2025, and will re-enter Gemini for good on April the 25th, 2026. Uranus will then stay in Gemini until August 2033. So this is again is a generational transit. The last time that Uranus was in Gemini was 1941 to 1949, which was World War II. And the time before that was 1858 to 1866, which was the American Civil War. And the time before that, it was 1774 to 1782, which is the American Revolutionary War. So Uranus is the planet of disruption and innovation, and Gemini rules language, code, communication, and learning. So the last time, as I said, Uranus was in Gemini, we saw a period of global communication revolutions in World War II. This was the rise, although it was an awful, awful war, and we can kind of be prepared for the world to move through another time of war that we're already in. And but it's also a time of revolution. And it was the rise of computing and code breaking and the early internet-like military tech. So it was the birth of the ENIAC computer, code breaking efforts like Bletchley Park, which were, the early roots of cryptography and crypto, the creation of the IMF and Bretton Woods financial system, and a massive expansion of mass media and communication infrastructure. So Uranus in Taurus between 2018 and 2025 has been shaking up values, money, crypto being created, inflation, inflationary cycles also happening, also been shaking up food systems and the environment. And Uranus in Gemini will bring technological revolutions in communication, transportation, and media, the disruption of how we think, learn, and connect, a rebirth of ideas and interventions, and unpredictable developments in education, AI, and networks. So when Uranus moves into Gemini, permanently, we will likely see a revolution in AI, digital learning, and programmable money. Although we talk about revolutions in communication and technology, and we obviously see Bitcoin, a Bitcoin narrative in there, we also have the centralized version of that. So we do have a revolution in stable coins and a rollout of a new sort of centralized financial system as well. So there's there's two things running parallel there. It's not just an either or, like Bitcoin wins automatically kind of thing. It's always a tale of two timelines, right? And you get to choose which one you participate in. We will also likely see a disruption to mainstream media. It's already happening with the BBC being called out on a lot of different scandals. Donald Trump suing them for billions of dollars, but there's also several other scandals that you can Google if you like. So this is like an undermining of these like very important, I would say, institutions, iconic institutions of mainstream media beginning to be undermined and sort of a lack of trust setting in or expanding for some people. And so a disruption to education and a disruption to legacy internet systems. We also can expect to see exponential growth in decentralized communication tools as well. So Uranus and Gemini will really shake the foundations of how we communicate and learn, which directly supports Bitcoin as an educational and ideological revolution, as well as a monetary one. So we may witness the breakdown of old financial systems of centralized fiat and traditional banking, and the birth of new decentralized digital financial infrastructure, with Bitcoin obviously at its core. But as I said, we also need to keep an eye on the centralized version of the digitalization as well. So what we're seeing astrologically is the crumbling of the old world and the birth of a new paradigm. So one that really aligns with Bitcoin's core principles of decentralization, transparency, sovereignty, and truth. And these are generational. As these generational planets move, so too does the human story. So Bitcoin isn't just a monetary revolution, it's really part of a cosmic timeline that we are witnessing being played out. Some other sort of cycles that I want to bring into this conversation as well, that sort of build my narrative around this, is that there's an interesting repeating cycle as well, economic cycle every 18 to 20 years, which we're due for now as well, that the mainstream economists often tend to miss. But it shows up in real estate crashes, banking panics, and major shifts in public confidence. And what's even more fascinating is that it correlates almost exactly with the cycle from Western astrology with the lunar nodal cycle. So like this isn't woo-woo, like it's data, it's pattern recognition. Two of the sort of key thinkers that I have been inspired by from this perspective is number one, Louise McWhirter, and she's probably the original financial astrologer, lived in the 1930s. And she released a book in 1938 called Astrology and Stock Market Forecasting, where she introduced this idea of the lunar nodal cycle and discovered that the moon's nodes, which move in an 18.6-year cycle, correlate with the booms and busts and are deeply significant in predicting the cyclical flow of collective consciousness, confidence, economic expansion, and contraction. I'm briefly interrupting this episode to speak to you about one of our partners, Ritual Supplements, and in particular, Ritual Stress Relief.
It's the first of its kind supplement powered by Bioseries technology. Unlike typical stress supplements that fade, Ritual's dual action formula gives you instant calm followed by all-day support. It works with your body's natural cortisol rhythm, helping you respond instead of react, ground instead of spiral. Its unique extended release blend delivers nature's calming adaptogens like ashwagandha and lemon balm when your body actually needs them. That means no crash, no fog, just clarity, focus, and nervous system balance. It's a sigh of relief that keeps going. So if you have spikes in your stress levels or are simply feeling dysregulated, give Ritual Stress Relief a try. Click on the link in the description box to find your perfect daily ritual. Okay, now that we found our Zen, let's get back to the show.
So the lunar nodes are the points where the moon's orbit intersects the ecliptic, which is the sun's apparent path. And these nodes move retrograde, so backwards through the zodiac, and complete a full cycle every 18.6 years. So the north node is the ascending node, signifying growth, destiny, expansion, and public focus. South node is the descending node, the decline, the release of past karma and contraction. And when the north node is in Leo, optimism surges and markets boom. However, when the north node is in Aquarius, confidence begins to collapse and crashes happen. So, a more modern economist who talks about, and real estate cycle expert, Philip J. Anderson, also talks about this elliptic cycle, but talks about it in terms of the US property market cycle, or more accurately, the land cycle. So he found that land speculation and bank credit cause a repeatable 18-year boom bust cycle as well. So there's a real estate cycle that repeats approximately 18 to 20 years. And he heavily cites historic US data from even from the 1800s all the way through to the modern day, showing that land speculation drives major booms followed by credit tightening and banking collapse. So this cycle is driven by land speculation, credit expansion, and government interference, particularly central bank policy and banking laws. So banking panics, depression, and booms all follow this real estate cycle. So major real estate collapses and banking failures, like in 2008, are predictable. And he forecasts the next major downturn to be in 2026 to 2027. So these all sync up perfectly. Louise McWhirter's astrological cycle and Anderson's real estate cycle line up almost exactly across centuries. How's, you can't get much deeper back testing than that, especially around the years that lead to major financial collapses. So in the year 1929, we saw the Great Depression, and the North Node was in Aquarius. We also saw a real estate and stock market crash. In 2008, we had the GFC. North Node was in Aquarius, land collapse and banks implode. And in 2026, guess where the North Node will be? Yeah, it'll be in Aquarius. So this is a forecasting of a top and a crash here. So these are two completely different systems, astrology and historical economics, and both are pointing to a 2026 to 2027 as a next major reset. So Bitcoin was born in the ashes of the 2008 crash. And now as we approach 2026, the next nodal and real estate crash alignment, we're entering the phase where trust in traditional financial systems erode again. And this is actually an environment that Bitcoin thrives in. And when I say that Bitcoin thrives, I don't necessarily mean the price in US dollars. I mean in terms of adoption and in terms of function, this ability to hold this asset outside of the system. So I think that these are really important factors to consider. And this is what I mean when I say that we're looking at like bigger cycles at play. And Bitcoin is just too small to override these kind of cycles, whether it be the macro liquidity cycle, whether it be these astrological cycles, whether it be the land and property market cycles. This is what I'm looking at. So what I'm expecting at this point in time is that we, for the rest of this year, we're kind of in an accumulation and preparation phase. So it's looking pretty ugly right now, but I just don't think that we have seen the expansion that we need that equates with the top. Because how markets function is that this last phase of the cycle, it generally happens in three legs. And the third leg up is the time that the market makers allow people to buy the most. And they're really building their short position, and that's their highest allocation to their short position, if you will, before they turn the cycle around. And so what I was wanting to look at astrologically was there are many pivot points, whether they be eclipses, which we talked about in previous episodes, or different astrological events that look like they could trigger a drop or a crash or a reversal. However, what I was wanting to see was between now and 2027, are there any periods where there is a big run up, allowing people to believe that we're going up forever? And then followed by a crash where the market makers take that all back. And so what I was looking at, and this is where I think that the top is likely to be. And I think that we will have that trigger and run up in euphoria. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be an all-time high. This could be the lower high being printed and that bearish reversal pattern being printed, but I don't think so. And so we could see that as we could see a blow-off top created. This could be a new all-time high. This could be a lower high being printed as well. We just don't know until we get there. But we can definitely prepare for it. The key events in 2026 is that we have a solar eclipse on February 17th. And they often mark new beginnings, shifts in directions, or sudden revelations. They've aligned with previous market crashes before. And they may trigger a sell-off as well, but they aren't preceded by this kind of aspect that will allow them to run up. We then have the lunar eclipse on March the 3rd, 2026. And again, this is a time of revelation. It also can be a trigger. So it may be a trigger for a sell-off, but I don't think that it's the sell-off. We then also have Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries in February 2026. So this is a really rare alignment of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and it marks the kind of the beginning of a new cycle of structure and spirituality. And it signifies the blending of realism and idealism. And it really helps to build something meaningful out of vision. So in the context of the market, this conjunction can lead to a revaluation of values and a shift towards more sustainable and grounded investments. So like the initiating of a correction phase. So these are all sort of pointers to when I think people are going to be calling the top and calling a reversal and telling us we're in a bear market, much like what people are saying right now. So just keep an eye on those. And again, protect yourself, prepare yourself for those. And then I think that we come into this Jupiter-Uranus alignment on July the 21st, 2021. This is a time where I can see a euphoric movement for Bitcoin. So I expect this to be the beginning of the end, really, for Bitcoin. But this is what I'm seeing. So July 2021, July 21st, 2026, sorry. And we then have on July 27th, 2026, we have the North Node entering Aquarius. So this is where the collective focus, I believe, will shift. As I've shown you just before, we have like 200 years of evidence showing that every time the North Node moves into Aquarius, there is a major market reset and a market crash across all markets. And then we also have on that very same day, giving us a real astrological confluence, we have Saturn retrograde beginning. So this is also a where a structural correction begins. And, just placing that Saturn retrograde restriction on Bitcoin's price. And I believe that that will be the onset of the bear market. So we have this um, Jupiter Uranus trine, which I think is going to be kind of like maximum period of momentum and euphoria. And this is a harmonious aspect between Jupiter, which is expansion and optimism, and Uranus, which is innovation and sudden change. So I expect this to amplify market enthusiasm, potentially leading to a euphoric peak in Bitcoin's value. We then have the North Node entering Aquarius, perfectly coinciding with Saturn's retrograde, creating this potent astrological signal for Bitcoin cycle top and initial bear market reversal. So we have that Jupiter Uranus mania that fuels that excess optimism and blow off top. We have the North Node and Saturn retrograde, confidence beginning to collapse and structural correction. And yeah, so I think that like Saturn retrograde as well is a period that's often associated with introspection, with reevaluation, and confronting personal and professional challenges. So this phase can lead to delays and the need to reassess long-term goals, which in the market context can trigger a correction as overvaluations are corrected and investors reassess their positions as well. So yeah, that's really what I'm looking at for the remainder of this cycle. So I'm kind of open to things being pretty choppy for the remainder of this year. We'll see what happens from the macro perspective um, as the Fed officially ends a period of quantitative tightening on December 1st. And then as we move into the new year, just be prepared, there are going to be these kind of sell-off events and things like that. I think that there is a real agenda to attempt for institutions need to buy Bitcoin from somewhere. And I think there is a real sort of psychological attack on Bitcoin holders trying to get you to sell your Bitcoin. And that's what I think that is happening right now, is that there's this attempt to try and get Bitcoin to be shift from retail hands and holders into institutional hands. And I think that that is why we have these big liquidation events. We have these really kind of scary moments. We have this sideways chop for basically a year, which is exhausting for anyone that is involved in these markets, right? And it's all designed to get you to sell your Bitcoin. And so, as I said at the beginning of this, if you are somebody that is wanting to take profits during the cycle, you need to be looking at the TA and being able to protect yourself now. If you are somebody who is hodling Bitcoin for the long haul, then just close your eyes and let it be. Because there is a lot of stuff coming. As I said, there are eclipses and different sell-off events that I think will happen. But I think that the major shift into the real bear market comes mid 2026. So could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. The top may already be in, and this period that I'm talking about may be that final push, creating that lower high. We just don't know. We have to see when we get there and reassess as we go. But I did want to share that extra astrology with you so that you kind of can keep in mind. And also the macro. Now, I'm not a macro analyst. I'm very interested in it for sure. But as I said, there's lots of events, and I'm not the only one, like very experienced macro analysts, animals, analysts have also expected these kind of events to happen sooner than they have. So we are in this period of ambiguity of how things are going to play out. So protect yourself, but also remain open um, to other possibilities. And that's all really that I have for you at this time. We'll return to regular scheduling for the full moon. And until then, peace, love, and Bitcoin.